Hello, Game Methuselah here. Well, I got home last week from my fabulous whirlwind trip through England, all the historical sites I could find there. And basically, I feel that my trip could be really summed up to all the things I didn't see. I think it left me really wanting more, and I'm going to do a video on my vacation. I think a lot of people wanted to hear about it. My trip itself was really positive, and I really enjoyed myself. And I think maybe some of the things I found out and saw and did would be of interest to you. So I'll likely do the next video on that. The thing was, I felt that the first video back really should be something fun. And I felt I owed you guys a Monster Mambo. And I know that I've been promising you the Grell for a while. So I was going to do a Grell Monster Mambo, and then it dawned on me. I actually needed to bring you a monster that you've never heard of. This is what I feel to be more than likely the greatest Dungeons & Dragons monster that never existed. Now, it's been credited to me for decades because of lots of people to play it with, and it made an appearance in many of my campaigns. But I didn't design it. It was designed by a good friend of mine named Bruce Schleckburn. He's a fabulous gamer. In fact, if you ever go to any of the strategic cons, you're likely to see him winning some strategic gaming tournament. And he created this monster in the 1976-77 era, I think 1976, when the game was really starting to catch on. Dungeons & Dragons was becoming very popular, and lots of people were building up higher level characters. And the most likely thing that people built up were magic users. And he came up with this creature, and when I decided to use it, I could not remember the name. So I called it the Onsigum. After I tell you about it, you can sort of reverse engineer the name and figure out what it means. But basically what it is a mutated relative to the doppelganger. It takes on the appearance of another creature with all its forms and memories and activities, and then lives that life like a doppelganger does. In many ways looking to sort of maybe replace the creature that it duplicates. Now, in this case, the creature doesn't really want to replace it. It just wants to sort of fit in, because what the Onsigum does is normally takes on the appearance of some hard-hitting melee creature. Now, in this case, I'm going to use a Grell, which for an Onsigum would be relatively small. Normally, an Onsigum might take on a look of a troll, an Umber Hulk, some brutal sort of melee creature that does lots of damage and is going to draw the attention of all the magic-using creatures that are out there. Thusly, you'll see my point. What the creature does, instill fear into the party that attacks, will go after all the melee characters first and foremost, to the exclusion of the magic users. Any arcanists it will just ignore. The secret of this creature is very simple. For every level of magical spell cast upon it, instead of taking any damage or any ill effect from the magical spell, it gains that many levels. Now, you can see the horror here, I think, pretty quickly. In the early days, when it was not uncommon to have 3 high-level arcanists, and they were suddenly hit upon by, say, 3 trolls who were really Onsigums, the wizards would fire 10 die, 11 die, 12 die fireballs, because, of course, trolls don't like fire. And the trolls would seem to like, oh, that's horrible and terrible. Maybe they could make an Arcana check. If they did, they might say, wait a minute, it doesn't seem like they're taking as much damage. That it seems like the spells maybe were absorbed, or they don't seem to be taking effect quite as well as you would have thought. That's the only tip-off that's going to go to players that something isn't quite right. Because what you would end up with, you could say a fireball is a 3rd level, 4th level spell. Maybe make it a 5th or a 6th, depending on how many levels. That's how many levels they're going to gain. Now, they gain the commensurate hit points for the levels. The other thing they would gain is the pluses to hit and resistance to any sort of saving throws they might have to make for non-magical abilities based upon the increase in their levels. They're still going to be brutal. This is a monster that a high arcanist using party would not be uncommon to see a potential party trash. So use it sparingly. Give them lots of outs to understand that maybe there's something going on here, that this creature is potentially deadly, and then have fun using it. Because it will change the way your players think about your game. Now, of course, remember, when they yell at you and call you a dirty name, it's always Jim Murphy's fault. Just say, Game Methuselah told me to do this, and of course, I am just a slave to his will, and I had to throw it at you. Now, they will have lots of fun and frivolity with this, and I'm sure it will bring hours of joy to your game playing. But remember, think about it, look at the ways you can utilize it, and then have a good time with it. So until we get a chance to speak again, game on. Enjoy my little monster mambo about the Grell, who are actually on Sigums. Well, here's page 172 of the original Monster Manual, 5th edition. Our little friend, the Grell. Now, they're pretty good creatures. They're CR3, low armor class, but have 2 good attacks. One of them is with reach and has poison. Very effective. The beak does a reasonable amount of damage. It has some conditional immunities, which are pretty good. But since, of course, these are on-Sigum Grell, they also have the on-Sigum ability where they absorb magic. That means any spell cast at them will raise their hit die level of the spell cast. So a 3rd level spell would raise them up 3 hit die. So in this case, they are D10. You would gain 3 additional D10. You can see where this goes pretty quickly. If the party is unaware of any of these and say, well, your spell seems to have penetrated the creature, or it just seems to dissipate, or you give them some clue that maybe the magic isn't working exactly how they expect it to, because these creatures are going to add a new level of difficulty. The on-Sigums, in this case being Grell, are going to perform every bit as you would perform Grell in a normal battle, and that's what I'm going to show you here. But remember, the whole point is the more magic gets tossed at them, the higher level they're going to be. So they may even act somewhat different. If the party does not have a large number of missile users, the on-Sigums will have no problem in case coming directly at the party in the open, double moving, not really being too worried about their safety, to try to maybe even draw magical attacks against them. If a lot of spells are cast at them, it could be really brutal. Now, Grell are CR3, so as on-Sigum Grells, I would move them up to 4, and then use the DMG appropriately. Now, as you know, I'm not really a big fan of the DMG. I pretty much wing it. I prepare the encounters based upon how I feel my players are, how tough their characters are, how well equipped with magical equipment they are, and all that. And I take that much more account than I do whatever the factors of the numbers are in the Dungeon Master's Guide. And the real reason is because being an experienced game master, I tend to think that I'm usually more likely to be right about my players than what the arbitrary statistics are going to be in the DMG. So this is our party. Now, it's really set up well for an on-Sigum attack. What you have essentially is a heavy-duty fighter and a rogue of some sort, maybe missile-armed, but more than likely nothing much more than a short bow and a sling. More than likely a fighting cleric. Also, it has 2 arcanists. Now, they're likely different, but it doesn't really make any difference. It's just a magic-heavy party. That's where you're going to want to use a creature like this, because there's where it's going to potentially draw the most dramatic effect. As the party is adventuring on, they find the entrance to an underground that they're familiar with, and this is where they're going. They have a map to treasure, a magical item, or they've just been sent by a patron to go find some very important item here. Within it, infested by 2 Grell. Unbeknownst to the party, they're on-Sigums, pretending to be Grell, and what they've been doing is feeding on the lesser creatures that have been coming in and out of this underground. Now, that's great for them. They can flee away from anything nastier, but they do pretty well against anything smaller, and they've been doing pretty good until this adventuring party shows up. But sensing the 2 magic users, the Grell realize that they might have an advantage here, because being on-Sigum Grell, they're going to benefit by the magical spells cast upon them by the wizards. Now, as the battle is engaged, the on-Sigums, understanding immediately that there are 2 arcanists here, they're going to want to proceed forward as fast as they can and get encountered. If nothing else, actually bring themselves in a position to be spell cast upon, so that they can use their ability to raise their levels up and make them substantially stronger. So if they win initiative, it would be not surprising for them to move the 30 feet they have, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and then maybe even double move around to sort of threaten the non-combatant magic users. If nothing else, to maybe draw a spell, but trying to engage combat with the combatants, the fighters, and in this case, the fighting cleric. They're going to want to fight them as fast as they can, because what they're going to do, hopefully, is poison them. Then, as I show you later how Grell would tend to fight, because they're Onsigums, to draw the magic users into throwing their higher level arcane spells at them, thusly raising their level, making them substantially more powerful, and thusly more dangerous. This has been a very, very, very deadly monster to me over the decades that I've run it. In this case, the party has won initiative, so they're going to do the absolute wrong thing. They're going to move up 5, 10, 15, 20, and ready combat actions for the fighters, because that's what they expect is going to happen. The rogue is going to come here and stealth, look for some cover, maybe move around terrain looking for a place to hide, depending on its movement and whatnot. Or it'll stay off at range, or it potentially might use a missile weapon. In this case, we're going to assume it's going to use a missile weapon, so we'll move it up into range, and it readies a missile attack. The wizards move up, doing the same, and they already spells to basically fire. And they could name the spells. They could be damage spells. They could be control spells. It almost doesn't really matter. But they have essentially fallen into the trap. At this point, the Onsigum Grells move. They move 30, because they hover, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. Perfect for the Grell. At this point, more than likely, the wizards will open up with 1 or 2 of their spells. Spells are fired, the effect takes place, and of course, because they're Onsigums, they've gained the additional levels based upon whatever spells were cast upon them. It attacks. Let's assume for the sake of argument, it hits the fighter. It does minimal damage, and the fighter, because of a high constitution, is able to resist the poison. But he is grappled. It does some damage. Fighter's not in bad shape, but he did get grappled. The second one then does the exact same thing, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Still doesn't have range to make it the other fighter character, which in this case is a cleric. So it has to have the attack again on the fighter. It makes the rolls either hit or damage. The question is whether the poison is. Unlikely a fighter is going to get poisoned, but what again they're trying to do is draw the spells. Characters go into their turn. The rogue comes up, makes a backstab attack, does the thing. The fighter, let's assume, tries to break free and either does or does not. But in this case, let's say he does not. And then the cleric moves up and attacks. Party seems to be doing fine. The wizards shift to get protection from the combatants. And they again open up with some magic. Maybe not high-level magic, maybe just a cantrip. Normally in a cantrip, I don't give them a whole level. What I would do in this situation for the way currently D&D 5 goes is I would just give them a random D6 of, or D8, depending on how nasty you want to be, of additional hit points. It's something, no matter what cantrip they throw, they're going to just gain a couple hit points. In every case, when the wizards are casting spells, occasionally have them make an arcana check, or make a perception check, or have maybe someone else maybe make an arcana or perception check. They're going to sort of get wise that something's going on, but that's okay. It's better that they get a little wise in this situation than become substantially angry with you on them later. But the attacks are made, and now goes to the Grell. Now, the Grell has a grapple. In this case, what he does is he bites as well. He does his bite, most likely on the fighter again, hits or misses. The second Grell is going to attack the cleric. Hit or miss, grapple, most likely. Poison, again, unlikely, but possible. Now, if they're poisoned, they're paralyzed, and that's a nasty poison. So a blow in a roll, which, is almost 50% for most characters, could be quite devastating. But what we have here now is after this Grell attacks, and the Grell picks up the character and moves away. But what has happened at this point is the Grell has moved up. It's 30 feet, carrying the grappled fighter. And this has always been sort of the big plus on Grell, is they use aerial. Whenever you use Grell, you want to have an aerial situation involved. if you're planning it, if it's not just a random encounter. Because Grells are going to truly fight in both dimensions. They're going to come in. They're really never going to land. I mean, these guys have a 10-foot reach, and that's what they're going to use. These guys are always going to be flying, in this case, hovering. So they're always going to be 5 feet above clear space, and they're in the space 10 feet up. And that makes them difficult to deal with because it will draw more spells, and that's what they're looking for. The battle continues at this point. We assume we did not grapple this one. He's staying there, and the cleric and him are battling it out. The wizards are going to maybe have copped to the fact that something's up, but it's unlikely they're going to stop casting spells. Following around, Barbarian's going to attempt to break grapple, which is a DC 15. Reasonably good to do, but even if he succeeds, he's going to take 3d6 of falling damage. If he doesn't, then what the Grell is going to do is attack again and then move. And as his movement, he's going to hover up another 30 feet. At that point, he's going to drop the fighter, doing most likely 5 dice of damage. But you can see how this battle is going. The fact is, at this point, the party thinks they're doing pretty well. They put some significant damage, they believe, on these monsters. They might even ask you if they're bloodied, in which case you have tell them they are not. They may have figured out that something is weird, but they may not know what it is. Battle continues here. The rogue moves over here to the other Grell to try to aid the cleric, and the battle will continue. But what will happen, of course, being the Grell, is on the following turn, they will just descend as their movement down to 10 feet and then attack. In this case, likely attack the rogue. And the reason being is the rogue has a missile weapon that can hurt them at distance. So they will normally try to target creatures that have missile weapons that can do damage to them when they are at distance. Magic users, they don't care. They will leave the magic users alone physically until they have killed all the combatants. Because combatants are the only thing that is of great danger to them, because obviously they are not immune to steel. Straight Grell you can use everywhere, and I would suggest them, and they're great for parties that are sort of kind of growing, 3rd level, 4th level parties. Not uncommon to run into a Grell, even run into multiple Grell, and they're pretty nasty. In this case, being on Sigums, I'd kind of wait till they were 5th level, kind of for 2 reasons. 1, since they're nastier, you want to let the party be a little tougher, and 2, from a completely selfish point of view, at 5th level they're going to have 3rd level spells, and likely going to want to air them out. And that, of course, is going to benefit you and your on-Sigum Grell. The outcome of this battle, especially if it's the first time they've run into on-Sigums, could actually be quite brutal. No idea how the battle's going to be here. My guess is at some point they're going to realize they've made a problem, and then it's going to be up to winning and losing and maybe how well the magic users can actually put up a melee battle. This could be very, very, very grueling, and you might be very unpopular at the end. So be very careful. But I wanted you to see this. The Grell are one of my new favorite Monster Mambo creatures. Again, if you're using Grell, and I suggest you do, these little pre-painted plastic ones are great. They look good. There's some metal ones out there. And there's new stuff coming out all the time, so you might even be able to find better ones than these. But these are really serviceable. All I gave them was a little dry brush and a wash, flocked the base, and they're ready to go. And I was really happy with them. 2 Grell against a 3rd or 4th level party, going to be a nasty fight, especially if you give them 3 dimensions. If they're stuck in a cave with 10-foot ceilings, they're not going to be so tough. But remember, the Grell's deal is attack, move, drop. And that is always going to be the way they follow up, because they can always come back down and pick up another character. So I hope you enjoyed this. So until we get a chance to speak again, fight to me, devils, fight, for I hate peace and I love on-Sigums.